Greetings, dear subscribers and casual visitors to my channel. In the magical world, there are families whose reputation has long been notoriously infamous, and the Malfoys certainly belong to such households. They are among the oldest, most influential and wealthiest wizarding families in Britain, renowned not only for their riches but also for their arrogance and contempt toward muggles and half-bloods. These well-known facts might not surprise you. Yet the history of the Malfoys is full of other, less obvious, and far more intriguing details that you might never have heard before. Let's delve deeper into the past of this powerful family and examine some of the most fascinating episodes from their history. Enjoy your journey. Number 1. Opposition to the Statute of Secrecy. Few people know that originally the Malfoys strongly opposed the adoption of the famous Statute of Secrecy. Before the enactment of this law, which forbade interaction between wizards and muggles, the Malfoys maintained connections with aristocrats and authorities in the muggle world. Losing these connections displeased the family. However, seeing the inevitability of the new law, they quickly changed their strategy, severing all ties with the non-magical world and seeking prominent positions within the new Ministry of Magic. The Malfoys even became some of the statute's most vocal defenders, vehemently denying any previous closeness to muggles despite their past. Number 2. The first Lucius Malfoy and Queen Elizabeth I. One scandalous episode in family history involves the first Lucius Malfoy's attempt to win the heart of England's famous Queen Elizabeth I. Elizabeth rejected his proposal and never married. Rumours even suggested that her decision was not merely personal, but the result of a curse cast by an angered Lucius. The Malfoy family officially always denied this version, yet among wizarding historians, it still persists. Number 3. Marriages with half-bloods. The Malfoy family is renowned for their pride and particular attitudes toward blood purity, believing their lineage grants them superiority over other wizards. Despite this dedication to pure-blood ideology, they notably avoid intermarriage between relatives, unlike some other wizarding families. In the relatively small magical community, the choice of potential spouses is limited. Therefore, Malfoys have repeatedly married half-blood wizards, whose lineage includes muggles, provided they maintained overall status. Number 4. Close family ties with other wizards. Due to the closeness of the magical community, the Malfoys are closely related to many prominent families. Draco's mother, Narcissa, belonged to the Black family, and her mother came from the pure-blood Rosier line. Narcissa's sister Bellatrix married Rodolphus Lestrange, a fact that the Malfoys always proudly highlighted. Another of Narcissa's sisters, Andromeda, married the half-blood wizard Edward Tonks, and their daughter Nymphadora later became the wife of Remus Lupin. Thus, the Battle of Hogwarts literally became a conflict involving relatives and blood relations. Number 5. Symbolism of the family crest. The Malfoy family crest is crafted in black, green, and silver colors, decorated with serpent figures, highlighting the family's reverence for Salazar Slytherin. Few are as proud of their connection to the famous Hogwarts founder as the Malfoys. Their Latin motto, Sanctimonium Vincit Semper, translates to purity will always conquer, again emphasizing their staunch stance on blood purity. Number 6. Origin of the Malfoy name. Even the family's surname is symbolic, reflecting their character. It comes from Old French, where mal means bad or evil, and foi means faith. Thus, the Malfoy name can be interpreted as bad faith or faith in evil. Through generations, the family remained faithful to their notorious reputation and convictions, despite public condemnation and issues with the law. Number 7. Armand Malfoy and the family manor. The founder of the Malfoy family estate was Armand Malfoy, who served King William III the Conqueror. Exact details of his service remain a mystery, but many believe magic played a significant role. The king rewarded Armand with extensive land seized from previous owners, and it was here that the Malfoys established their ancestral home, standing for centuries. Number 8. Septimus Malfoy and Minister for Magic Unctuous Osbert. Unctuous Osbert, the 10th Minister for Magic, who governed from 1789 to 1798, was a close friend of Septimus Malfoy. Rumours persisted that Septimus exerted such considerable influence over Unctuous that he effectively controlled the ministry from behind the scenes. If true, Septimus Malfoy may have been the family's most influential member throughout history. Number 9. Abraxas Malfoy and the Muggle-born Minister for Magic. Abraxas Malfoy, Draco's grandfather and Lucius's father, was suspected of plotting against the first Muggle-born Minister for Magic, Nobby Leach. In 1968, Leach mysteriously fell ill and was forced to resign prematurely. Given the family's views on blood purity, suspicions directed at Abraxas seem plausible. Number 10. Forgiveness of the Malfoys after Voldemort's fall. Following Voldemort's defeat, the Malfoy family avoided severe punishment. Lucius betrayed many Death Eaters, Draco refused to serve the Dark Lord during the final battle, and Narcissa lied to Voldemort about Harry Potter's death. Despite receiving this pardon, Lucius Malfoy continued collecting dark artifacts until the end of his life. Among his acquisitions was even a powerful time turner, which became a crucial element in the plot of Harry Potter and the Cursed Child. Number 11. The Secret Malfoy Library. Beneath Malfoy Manor, deeper than the bones of the earth, lies a secret. Not a room. A vault. A library carved in silence and sealed with blood. They call it the Black Vault. No one outside the family has seen it. No map marks it. No spell reveals it. But the ministry tried, more than once. Each time they left confused, empty-handed, or worse. One aura never came back. Another returned, pale, trembling. He said only one thing. The books knew I didn't belong. Only two may enter. The family head and the heir. That's the rule. That's the curse. Lucius was 17 when Abraxas led him down, past the cellars, through a wall that moved like water. Don't speak inside, his father warned. The vault listens. It's not a library, it's a living mind. Shelves twist into impossible shapes. Some books whisper, some cry. One bleeds when touched, another growls if you stare too long. The air burns cold, the floor shifts under your feet. Draco saw it when he was 18. The key was a ring, silver and black. The gem never stops moving. Inside he found a book chained to the wall, its title, Inheritance of Flame. He never opened it. Not yet. Number 12. Malfoys and Alchemy. Brutus Malfoy was different. While his relatives played with curses and politics, he chased something older, alchemy. He spent days sealed in stone rooms, no light, no noise. Just scrolls, gold dust, and boiling mixtures. Even the house elves feared to knock. In 1765 he met Nicolas Flamel. The Nicolas Flamel. Their friendship was strange. Flamel was quiet, cautious. Brutus was sharp, relentless. They met in Marseille at a hidden gathering of magical scholars. You see too much, Flamel once wrote, but you fear too little. Still he worked with him, for years, in secret. Some believe Brutus helped create a second Philosopher's Stone, or almost did. One small vial found in his lab shimmered like molten ruby. It never aged. Its color changed with the moon. Goblins called it elemental echo. Others whispered unfinished immortality. Lucius knew, but he never spoke of it. The lab stayed locked, buried under spells. When Voldemort took the manor, he warned, "No one enters the East Wing." One Death Eater ignored him. He returned, screaming, skin covered in symbols that moved. Lucius watched in silence. In the library, there's a shelf of nameless books. You can't copy them, can't even photograph them. Open one, and it smells like fire and cinnamon. Draco once asked about them. Lucius answered coldly, "Some magic was never meant for boys." Number 13, portrait collection with a voice. The west wing of Malfoy Manor is always quiet, curtains drawn, doors locked. But behind one set of enchanted oak doors lies a gallery few have seen. A long, dim corridor lined with magical portraits. Each one bears the image of a Malfoy ancestor, and each one speaks. Lucius Malfoy often visited the gallery late at night. He would light only a single candelabra and walk slowly, stopping before the frame of Septimus Malfoy, Minister for International Magical Affairs in the 1700s. "Your world is crumbling," Septimus once told him, "but power doesn't vanish, Lucius. It shifts." Lucius took the advice to heart. The portraits are more than decorations. They listen, they remember, and they advise. A charm woven into the canvas allows them to speak not only to visitors, but to one another. "It's like entering a council meeting," Narcissa once whispered to Bellatrix, "only with more ghosts and less shouting." Each generation added to the wall. Some portraits hang high, like that of Cassiopeia Malfoy, who discovered 3 blood-binding spells still used in ancient rituals. Others sit closer to the floor, whispering warnings to curious children. Draco once tried to sneak into the gallery at age 9. His great-great-uncle Scorpius barked, "Back to bed, boy. This room is not for games." But when Draco grew older, the portraits changed their tone. They advised, they judged. During the darkest days of the war, when the Malfoys were cornered between Voldemort and survival, Lucius spent hours in the gallery. "Is loyalty still your currency?" asked Octavius Malfoy's portrait. "Because betrayal pays faster." Lucretia Malfoy's portrait is there too, smaller than the others, placed in a far alcove. But her voice is calm and wise. When Draco stood before her after the fall of the Dark Lord, she said softly, "You are not bound to their choices. Knowledge can rebuild a name." He listened. Number 14. Not all Malfoys were in Slytherin. The Sorting Hat didn't hesitate. "Ravenclaw!" it shouted, and the great hall went silent. Lucretia Malfoy, niece of Armand Malfoy and heir to one of the oldest pure blood lines in Britain, had broken tradition. Her silver-blonde hair and proud bearing screamed Slytherin, but the hat had seen something else. The news reached Malfoy Manor before dinner. Armand was furious. He sent a letter that very night, sealed in green wax and carried by a black owl. "Correct this," he wrote to Headmaster Dippet. "The hat must be mistaken. The Malfoy mind belongs to Slytherin." But Dippet never replied. And the hat never changes its choice. Lucretia didn't return home for Christmas that year. Rumour has it her mother cried for days, while her father refused to speak her name. But inside the Ravenclaw Tower, Lucretia thrived. She devoured books like they were air. She challenged professors. By 3rd year, she was tutoring 6th years in arithmancy and ancient runes. "Intelligence is not treason," she once told a sneering Slytherin prefect. Her voice was cold, her eyes unshaken. Some feared her. Most respected her. Even Dumbledore, then just a Transfiguration professor, kept an eye on her. "That girl," he once said in a staff meeting, "will outgrow her name." By graduation, Lucretia had rewritten 3 magical theories and proposed a 4th. Her thesis on wand resonance is still taught in advanced classes. She was offered a seat at the Department of Mysteries before her 18th birthday. She refused, chose research instead. Quiet, powerful, independent. The Malfoys never spoke of her. She was erased from family portraits. At gatherings, her name was replaced with a cold silence. But she didn't care. In her London study, surrounded by ancient scrolls and experimental charms, she carved her own name into the world, one not tied to a house or a bloodline. Number 15. Banned from Quidditch governance. Few recall the name Octavius Malfoy today, but in the 18th century he nearly tore apart the entire world of Quidditch. Known for his charm and cunning, Octavius was more than a fan. He was an obsessed patron. The Malfoy family's favourite team, the Wiltshire Wyverns, had lost 3 finals in a row. That, for Octavius, was unacceptable. In 1782, the Wyverns made it to the International Quidditch Championship. The crowd roared, the skies were electric. But behind the scenes, Octavius was already at work. He quietly met with 3 referees. A bribe was offered, galleons in heavy bags, and something more, a promise of influence within the Confederation. The final match was a disaster. The opposing team, the Dublin Griffins, had 3 goals disqualified for technical fouls. The Wyverns' seeker, who caught the snitch just seconds before being hit by a bludger, was celebrated as a hero. But the crowd saw the truth. Booing filled the stadium, and then came the investigation. It didn't take long. The Confederation found proof: gold transfers, private letters. One note, now kept in the Magical Games archives, read, "Ensure victory. Our family's honour depends on it. Discretion will be rewarded." It was signed, unmistakably, O. Malfoy. The fallout was swift. Octavius was banned from every stadium in Europe. The Wiltshire Wyverns were disbanded, and a new rule was carved into the Confederation's charter. No member of the Malfoy bloodline may hold office in the International Quidditch Confederation in perpetuity. The shame followed the family for generations. Lucius Malfoy once tried to reverse the ban, arguing that the past shouldn't condemn the future. But the Confederation refused. "The sky must be fair," said Chairman Dmitry Volkov in 1987, and the Malfoys brought storms. Number 16. Hidden influence over Hogwarts. Behind the gilded doors of Hogwarts, more than spells were cast. Influence was a form of magic too, and few mastered it like the Malfoys. Long before Harry Potter ever boarded the train, Lucius Malfoy was already weaving quiet spells of control, not with wands, but with gold. Before Dumbledore rose to power, the Malfoys were generous benefactors. Too generous. Donations came with letters. Letters came with demands. Reconsider the appointment of Muggle-born instructors. Review the suitability of certain textbooks. Prioritize the education of wizarding tradition. No signature was needed. Everyone knew who wrote them. In 1949, a year before Armando Dippet retired, Lucius's father, Abraxas Malfoy, donated a new wing to the potions department. It came with one condition: Horace Slughorn must be appointed as head of Slytherin House. Slughorn, flattered and far too ambitious, accepted without question. Dumbledore, then only a Transfiguration professor, took note. Quietly, when Dumbledore became headmaster, everything changed. The gold kept coming, but the conditions were ignored. Lucius tried charm first: letters on fine parchment, tea invitations, promises of new equipment, and rare ingredients for the classrooms. Dumbledore declined them all. "Hogwarts does not belong to gold, Mr. Malfoy, nor to blood," he once told him during a meeting, according to a note from Professor McGonagall. Lucius didn't give up. He turned to the Board of Governors. He joined it. Then slowly filled it with allies, wealthy pureblood families, silent puppets in expensive robes. In 1992, Lucius led the vote to suspend Dumbledore during the Chamber of Secrets crisis. For a brief moment, the school belonged to him. But it didn't last. The school had its own magic, one even Lucius couldn't command. The rivalry deepened after that. Malfoy began using his influence to block school funding, spread rumors in the Prophet, whispered about Dumbledore's dangerous ideas. But the headmaster stood firm. He refused to alter the curriculum. Number 17. Malfoys and Dragons. The Malfoys have always been fascinated by dragons, not as simple creatures but as living emblems of power. There is no greater symbol of magical superiority than a dragon, Lucius Malfoy once declared during a private gathering at the Manor, according to an account written by family friend Livius Knott. For the Malfoys, dragons weren't beasts, they were allies, weapons, status. The most infamous example of this obsession was Tiberius Malfoy, Lucius's ancestor from the 18th century. Tiberius didn't just admire dragons, he kept one. Not a docile breed like the Antipodean opali. No, he owned a Hungarian horntail. Its name was Valabrac. Stories say its eyes were the color of molten gold, and its tail could snap a carriage in two. Tiberius was feared, and not just for his wealth. When a rival potion maker from Dover tried to outbid him on a trade contract, Valabrac appeared hovering above the man's estate the next morning. The fields were scorched. The deal collapsed. No one ever dared question a Malfoy contract again. Local wizarding authorities turned a blind eye at first. The Malfoys had friends in high places, but when Valabrac was spotted by a group of Muggle children during a storm, its shadow flashing across the sky, things escalated quickly. Obliviators were dispatched. The press was silenced, but the secret was slipping. It was Dolores Umbridge, then a young assistant in the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures, who led the investigation. "It is beyond recklessness," she wrote in her memo to the minister, "for a private citizen to harbor such a volatile, magical beast in a residential estate." She failed to mention that her own cousin had recently suffered minor burns visiting the manor. In response to the scandal, the ministry passed what became known as the Malfoy Clause, a strict prohibition against private dragon ownership. It was discreetly worded, of course. The Malfoy name was never mentioned, but everyone in the wizarding world knew the real reason for the law. Number 18. Failed alliance with Grindelwald. In the shadowy corridors of wizarding history, few stories are as intriguing and as overlooked as the almost alliance between the Malfoy family and the dark wizard Gellert Grindelwald. It is a tale buried under layers of secrecy, pride, and unspoken betrayal. Yet for those who peer closely into the cracks of magical history, it offers a window into what might have been, not just for the Malfoys, but for the entire wizarding world. At the heart of this tale stands a lesser-known figure in the Malfoy lineage, Cassius Malfoy, uncle to Abraxas and great-uncle to Lucius. It was he who once walked the fine line between political ambition and darkness, hoping to ride the storm of Grindelwald's revolution, to restore the glory of a family that even then was beginning to feel the tremors of change. Cassius was a man of sharp intellect and sharper ambition. Born in 1878, he came of age at a time when the wizarding world was still recovering from the Goblin rebellions and internal power struggles that had left many old families fractured or weakened. The Malfoys, once prominent advisors to the crown and proud enforcers of pure blood doctrine, had begun to lose their grip on influence, both in the ministry and in society. Cassius, sensing the shifting winds, refused to accept decline. He believed that wizarding supremacy was not only inevitable, it was necessary. And when whispers of a young revolutionary stirring change in the heart of Europe reached his ears, he saw in Grindelwald not a threat, but an opportunity. Their first meeting took place in 1926 in a private salon in Paris, beneath the cover of a dueling symposium. Cassius, then nearing 50, was still a striking figure, tall, immaculately dressed, with a voice that could melt resistance like butter. Grindelwald was younger, charismatic, and already trailed by tales of brilliance and cruelty. According to a rare diary fragment uncovered in 1983 by magical historian Elspeth Durbridge, Cassius wrote, "The man burns with vision. There is fire in his words, and I would see it forge a new order." Their conversations spanned hours and nights, dancing between ideology and strategy. Cassius did not flinch at Grindelwald's assertions that Muggles were a danger to wizardkind's future. Instead, he offered his family's resources, safe houses, relics, and names of sympathizers within the British Ministry of Magic. It was more than mere politics. Cassius believed Grindelwald would usher in a new magical renaissance. For decades, the international statute of secrecy had stifled progress, he claimed. Why should we, the bearers of power, hide like cowards in the woods while Muggles build empires of iron and fire? He once thundered in a gathering of like-minded purebloods. Grindelwald's mantra, "for the greater good," resonated deeply. To Cassius, it was not a call to terror, but to awakening. However, not everyone in the Malfoy family approved. Abraxas Malfoy, then a rising star in British wizarding circles, expressed strong reservations. Though still young, Abraxas had a cunning political mind and understood the cost of public alignment with dark powers. In a letter to his cousin Septimus, he wrote, "Uncle Cassius toys with fire, and I fear he forgets that fire burns without loyalty." Abraxas warned that an open alliance with Grindelwald could alienate the family from the ministry and from more discreet networks of influence. The Malfoys had always preferred control from the shadows, not from the tip of a wand on a battlefield. Still, negotiations continued. Cassius promised Grindelwald support in Britain, silent alliances with several noble families, enchanted artifacts held deep in the vaults beneath Wiltshire, and even ancient texts that spoke of spells long buried. Grindelwald, in return, offered nothing less than the future. It seemed an agreement was imminent, and yet, in the spring of 1927, the talks ceased. Abruptly, no announcement, no scandal, just silence. What happened? For decades, historians speculated. Some claimed that Grindelwald, ever the tactician, deemed the Malfoys unreliable. Others whispered that Cassius had backed away after a terrifying vision, possibly from a cursed mirror Grindelwald showed him. In her comprehensive study, Echoes of the Dark, author Martha Lièvremont theorizes, Cassius Malfoy, though ruthless, was never cruel. Grindelwald, on the other hand, saw cruelty as a tool. When Cassius witnessed firsthand the prison of Nurmengard being built not as a fortress against Muggles, but as a chamber for wizards, he recoiled. The line between supremacy and tyranny had become too thin. But a more sinister theory persists, that Cassius tried to manipulate Grindelwald, to use the Dark Wizard's rise as a means to reclaim dominance for his own family. Grindelwald, sensing this duplicity, walked away. "He will not kneel," Grindelwald reportedly told Vinda Rosier, one of his closest followers. "And if he will not kneel, he has no place in the new world." This chilling quote was recorded in a letter intercepted by the French Ministry of Magic, now sealed in the archives of magical threats. The collapse of this alliance marked a turning point in Cassius's life. He retreated from public view, vanishing into the corridors of the Malfoy Manor, rarely seen again. Some say he wandered the underground vaults for weeks, speaking to no one. Others claim he began writing, a memoir never published, containing truths too dangerous for the light. One house elf who served the family during this time, a creature named Fibbins, testified under Veritaserum years later. Master Cassius looked in the mirror and wept. Said the man he followed had no soul. In 1933, Cassius died under ambiguous circumstances. Officially, it was listed as a duel gone wrong. He had been experimenting with ancient defensive enchantments, the ministry reported. But no duel partner was ever named. The family never spoke of him again. Not at the funeral, not in family meetings, not even in whispers. It was as if Cassius had been cut from the tapestry. yet the shadow of that almost alliance lingered. Abraxas rose through the ministry ranks, becoming a trusted advisor to Minister Nobby Leach, only to later support Cornelius Fudge in the 1980s. His son, Lucius, inherited both the ambition of Cassius and the caution of his father. When Voldemort rose to power, Lucius aligned himself with him, but always kept a door open for self-preservation. The Malfoys learned their lesson. They would never again place all their gold on one dark wizard. Still, the ghost of Grindelwald never truly left the halls of the Malfoy estate. In one chilling episode during the summer of 1979, a guest at Malfoy Manor reported seeing a locked chamber sealed with rune-marked iron. Narcissa Black, not yet Lucius's wife, warned the guest not to speak of what they'd seen. "That room belonged to a man who dreamed too much," she said. Rumours claim it held a portrait, unfinished, of Grindelwald, half-painted in oil and fire. Number 19. The Lost Malfoy Heir. In the shadowed halls of Malfoy Manor, there exists a silence too old to speak of. It is the silence of a name once spoken with pride, now buried beneath layers of dust and enchantments. This name belonged to Claudius Malfoy, the elder son of Septimus Malfoy, a man of strict bloodlines and colder affections. In the eyes of his family, Claudius committed the unforgivable. He chose love over legacy. The year was 1867, and the world, for all its progress, still held firm to the ancient prejudices of pure blood supremacy. Claudius, at the age of 21, fell in love not just with any witch, but with a muggle-born. Her name was Elena Whitmore, a girl with fire in her heart and magic in her fingers. She studied at Hogwarts just as Claudius did, but in different houses, he in Slytherin, she in Ravenclaw. Their paths crossed not in the grandeur of school corridors, but in the silence of the library, where Claudius stumbled upon her humming to herself while reading theories of transubstantial transfiguration. Her presence, he later wrote in a hidden journal, cut through the marble air of the castle like a warm breeze in the depths of winter. That single meeting grew into secret exchanges, notes tucked between books and long, whispered conversations beneath the old beech tree by the lake. The Malfoy name came with a price: obedience. Claudius knew from early childhood that his fate had been pre-arranged, his wife likely chosen before he could even spell her name. But Elena had eyes that made him question everything. "I don't care where I come from," she once told him during a stormy night in the astronomy tower. "But I care where I'm going, and if you're beside me, then that place is worth reaching." Claudius was torn between duty and heart, but in the end, it was love that claimed him. On July 12, 1870, in the dead of night and under a disillusionment charm, Claudius and Eleanor vanished from England. Rumours whispered that they were seen boarding a ship from Portsmouth, heading for the southern seas. They left behind no trace but a single torn page from Claudius's journal, left open on his bed. "Blood is not thicker than love, it only stains more." The Malfoys, enraged and humiliated, erased his name from the family tree, removed all portraits and sealed every record. To speak of Claudius became forbidden. To remember him was betrayal. Over the years, stories of Claudius grew scarce, surviving only in the murmurs of the house elves who once tended to him. One elf, Brimp, was overheard in 1922 muttering, "Master Claudius always liked apple pie, same as the girl. Sweetest smell in the manor till they vanished." But even Brimp was silenced with a hex of forgetting. It was said that Lucius Malfoy, when he inherited the estate decades later, ordered a special enchantment over the family archives. Any mention of Claudius would instantly be burned to ash. But history is stubborn, and magic, for all its precision, has a way of preserving truth in the most unexpected places. In 1981, a worn leather book surfaced in the attic of an old house in Sydney, Australia. The owner, a half-blood wizard named Thomas Whitmore, claimed it belonged to his grandmother's father, a man named Cassian Malfoy Whitmore, born in 1875. The book, written in fine ink and sealed with a crest identical to that of the Malfoys, detailed a journey from England, a secret marriage, and the construction of a modest magical estate near the Blue Mountains. Inside that journal were several spells of English origin, long outdated by modern standards, and even a handwritten copy of Claudius's own wand design, Blackthorn, 13 inches, with a unicorn hair core. A wand, he wrote, should never choose a master by blood, but by spirit. These words echoed through the pages like rebellion wrapped in poetry. Even more astonishing was a family tree at the back of the journal, detailing 5 generations of descendants, each one bearing traces of both Malfoy charm and Whitmore wit. One name stood out, Aurora Malfoy Whitmore, born in 1960, described as bright as lightning and twice as quick to strike. According to the notes, she had never been to England, never been to Hogwarts, but had established a magical bookshop in Melbourne called the Wild Rune. That shop, oddly enough, had been mentioned in the Daily Prophet in 1994 as a fascinating outpost of magical artifacts and banned literature, though its owner had declined to speak to reporters. Could it be that the blood of Malfoy, long thought pure and unbroken, had already circled back to the wizarding world through a different name? It is worth noting that nowhere in the noble and most ancient house of black tapestry, shown in Grindelwald Place, does the name Claudius appear. This absence is not an oversight, it is a scar. Even Narcissa Malfoy, who prided herself on genealogy, refused to acknowledge the family branch that might have stretched across oceans. "We have no such blood," she was once overheard telling Bellatrix. But in a world where portraits whisper and family trees are enchanted, can such erasure ever truly be complete? Draco Malfoy, though raised in the shadows of legacy, was once seen examining an old parchment in the Hogwarts library in 1998. Hermione Granger, who stood near him at the time, claimed in a later interview he looked shaken. It was as if something inside him cracked, and then he said quietly, "I think there was another Malfoy who chose differently." Whether he found the story of Claudius or merely suspected something lost in the silence, we may never know. But one thing is certain. The idea of a Malfoy who chose love, who walked away from power and title, was a dagger to the myth of superiority. Some claim that a descendant of Claudius returned to England in 2007 under the name Gabriel Whitmore, enrolling in a lesser-known European magical university. It was said that he bore striking features, blonde hair, steel-grey eyes, but spoke with an Australian accent and wielded magic in a way that was graceful but fierce. One of his professors described him as the kind of wizard who makes you believe in second chances. The name Malfoy never appeared on his forms, but that didn't stop whispers from spreading. Skeptics dismiss the entire tale as fantasy. "If there was a lost Malfoy heir," said Phineas Nigellus Black's portrait, "he would have been hunted down, not left to brew potions in the colonies." But even portraits can lie, or be instructed to. The magic of silence, after all, is often stronger than the magic of memory, and in the case of the Malfoys, the silence around Claudius is more telling than any tale. Number 20. Secret patrons of St. Mungo's Hospital. Few names in the wizarding world evoke such a complex mixture of fear, respect, and disdain as the Malfoys. Often associated with dark corridors of influence and whispered alliances with the Death Eaters, the family carries a legacy cloaked in suspicion. And yet buried beneath their legacy of arrogance and power lies a secret, one that even the closest allies of Lucius Malfoy would find difficult to believe. It is whispered, with no signatures and no portraits on the wall, that the Malfoys have for years been among the most significant financial patrons of St. Mungo's Hospital for Magical Maladies and Injuries. Not one galleon bore their crest, not one wing carried the Malfoy name, but in hidden ledgers and between the lines of donation records were discreet references, Monsieur Benefactor 042, or simply patron with condition of anonymity. Healers knew better than to ask. Those who pressed were silenced by administrative redirection, or more chillingly, by quiet transfer. The Malfoy family, particularly Lucius, had a way of making help feel like a threat. Yet help it remained, and for all his pride, Lucius did not seek thanks. He demanded results. It began, as many curious tales do, with a single case. A child born with a rare magical affliction that caused uncontrollable bursts of elemental magic. The infant, unknown to the public, was distantly related to Narcissa Black, Lucius's wife. The disorder was lethal, tearing through wards and burning through healers' charms. When all known cures failed, St. Mungo's launched a desperate research project. They required ingredients only found in black market potion vaults and experimental charms not yet approved by the ministry. Overnight, a shipment arrived, sealed, anonymous, and perfectly tailored to their needs. The cost? Thousands of galleons. The origin? A single owl feather with a faint trace of peacock perfume, Lucius's calling card. Lucius Malfoy is not generous, Arthur Weasley once said with scorn, unless there's power to be gained. But perhaps power was not always the end game. Narcissa's connection to the suffering child may have stirred something more human. In a private letter later found in a ministry archive, Lucius wrote to a hospital administrator, "No names, no public gratitude, but you will have what you need. Spare no expense, and keep her alive." The girl, now 17, lives quietly in northern Scotland, her condition stabilized through a series of spells developed with funds from the anonymous donor. St. Mungo's is not a castle of grandeur, it is a building of healing, cloaked in ordinary brick on the outside and miracles on the inside. Behind its potions and charms lies the need for immense funding. The ministry provides, yes, but the real advances come from private donors. Most were public faces, members of the Wizengamot, owners of wizarding corporations, even Florian Fortescue in better years. But one donor stood out for his silence, as director Elladora Moore once confided to a colleague. "The money comes like magic. No owl, no note, just a pouch of galleons or a Gringotts draft with no return address. But we know it's him. Who else sends funding for a cure we didn't even announce yet?" Lucius's interest in magical medicine began to shift after the fall of the Dark Lord. Defeated and humiliated, stripped of status and power, the Malfoys sought redemption, but not the kind spoken of in court. They sought it in the shadows. While Draco tried to rebuild his life under a new banner of quiet civility, Lucius turned to philanthropy. He funded research into long-ignored conditions like spell reversal syndrome, incurable potion toxicity, and, most famously, long-term Cruciatus curse trauma. It was the case of Frank Longbottom that reignited his involvement. Though Lucius never publicly expressed regret, there was a shift. Alice and Frank Longbottom had been victims of the same circle he once called allies. Their minds destroyed by madness, they sat in the Janus Thicky ward, vacant and whispering to invisible foes. It is said that one winter evening, dressed in grey and hooded, Lucius visited the ward. A healer later claimed to have seen him place a small silver box on Alice's bedside table. Inside was a vial containing an experimental restorative potion not yet licensed. She didn't drink it, but the gesture echoed. The irony was profound. A man once complicit in dark magic now funneled gold into the very walls that treated its consequences. His motivations were a subject of heated debate. Some believed it was guilt, Others thought it was image repair. But perhaps in Lucius's twisted sense of nobility, it was duty. As he once told Severus Snape, overheard in a forgotten part of Spinner's End, "If we build the world we helped to scar, perhaps history will not remember us solely by our sins." The research wing that developed a breakthrough potion for venomous tentacular poisoning was entirely funded by an unnamed donor. Records show that in 2005, a vault transfer of 90,000 galleons arrived just days before the ward opened. The wing treated dozens of patients in the following years, including the granddaughter of Madame Pomfrey, who had been injured during a herbology mishap at Ilvermorny. When asked if she knew the identity of the benefactor, Pomfrey only said, "Sometimes angels wear masks, and some masks are heavier than others." Lucius's donations were not without strings. He demanded results, he requested reports, formulas, magical schematics, never in person, always via magically sealed scrolls delivered by sleek owls with enchanted plumage. The healers grew used to them. They called them the Silent Wings. Once, a young researcher named Calliope Trigg accidentally included a thank you note in a reply scroll. The owl returned the next day, parchment charred. The message was clear. Lucius Malfoy did not want gratitude. He wanted silence. One of the most remarkable cases involved a wizard named Thaddeus Tremor, a once brilliant spellcrafter, stricken by a mental collapse after experimenting with time-altering enchantments. Tremor became unstable, raving about voices and futures he couldn't forget. Healers believed he was beyond saving. Then came a parcel, ancient runes, translation guides, and the prototype for a counterspell developed by Egyptian wizards centuries ago. Tremor's mind slowly returned. The spell had been forgotten for ages, but Lucius's vast collection of magical texts, many acquired during questionable years, held the secret. He gave it freely, quietly. Even Draco Malfoy in later years hinted at his father's strange obsession with the hospital. In a rare interview with the Daily Prophet, Draco said, "My father saw things differently after the war. He believed magic had to be healed, not wielded. He never said why, he just wrote checks, opened vaults, sent books. Sometimes I wondered if he thought he was paying a debt, or casting a very slow, very complicated spell of absolution." One evening, a fire broke out in the artifact rejection ward, a section where patients suffered severe backlash from cursed objects. The fire was nearly catastrophic. Minutes after the flames were subdued, a replacement wing was already in construction, thanks to an instant gold transfer from an anonymous source. The very next morning, a delivery arrived at the ministry from Malfoy Manor, blueprints for a safer, curse-repelling ward structure. The goblins at Gringotts later confirmed that a Malfoy vault had been activated the night of the fire. The Malfoys never spoke of it. Narcissa carried herself as if the hospital didn't exist, and Lucius made no mention in public. But portraits of old healers in the hospital hallways began to note a strange figure in the background, always half-shadowed, silver-haired, with a cane. When questioned, the portrait of healer Dagmar Pierce once muttered, "He stood there for hours, just watched, said nothing, left before the sun rose." Guilt is a funny potion, bitter but binding. To some, this secret philanthropy only deepens the mystery. If Lucius was seeking redemption, why hide it? Why not let the world know he had changed? The answer may lie in his pride. Redemption, in Lucius's mind, was not a public performance. It was a transaction with the soul. He did not want the applause of the press. He wanted peace with his own legacy. As he once told Draco during a tense evening in Malfoy Manor, overheard by a house elf named Brindle, "Our name cannot be cleaned, but it can be buried under deeds no one dares question." Years later, when Lucius fell gravely ill, The only healers he permitted near him were from St. Mungo's. He insisted they not mention his contributions, even as they used potions he'd helped fund. On his final day, a young healer named Thane Everhart asked him why he had done so much for the hospital. Lucius, frail but lucid, replied, "Because sometimes the only way to cure the world is to fund the antidote to your own venom." His will made no mention of the hospital, but the very next day St. Mungo's received a shipment of rare dragon heartstring valued at 40,000 galleons, along with an anonymous endowment for the construction of a new children's ward. The package bore no crest, but the owl's feathers shimmered silver, and its eyes were green. Number 21. Cursed Family Jewels. The grand halls of Malfoy Manor were silent, save for the gentle rustle of velvet drapery stirred by a draught no one could find. The portraits along the corridor, sharp-cheeked patriarchs and hollow-eyed matriarchs, watched with disdainful stillness as the young woman walked past them, her fingers wrapped tightly around a small obsidian jewelry box. The candlelight danced across her pale face, but her eyes betrayed her trembling resolve. Her name was Avelina Rosier, a cousin by blood to the proud Malfoy line, and on that fateful night in 1862 she made a choice that would haunt her bloodline for generations. The box she carried was forbidden. She had taken it from a locked cabinet in the West Wing, where only the true heirs of the Malfoy family dared tread. Inside lay the fabled Nocturna's collar, a necklace of black pearls and a silver serpent pendant, said to have been enchanted, or cursed, by a spurned witch named Morwenna Grey in the 1500s. Morwenna, a powerful seeress from Cornwall, had fallen for the icy charms of Septimus Malfoy, who used her affections and then discarded her with little more than a smirk. Before vanishing into the forested coasts of the West Country, Morwenna declared, "Your blood shall wear these gems, or blood shall be spilled. Let none but a true Malfoy bear the silver serpent, or madness shall be their crown." Avelina had heard the tale growing up. Everyone in the family had. But she, like many before her, believed it a mere story meant to scare children away from the vaults. The necklace had not been seen for decades, but curiosity, pride, and a quiet jealousy of her Malfoy cousins led her to seek it out. She wanted to be seen, not just as a Rosier, but as something more, something dangerous, something remembered. When she fastened the necklace around her neck that evening, Avelina expected a rush of power. Instead, her heart stuttered in her chest. She grasped at her throat, choking on air that suddenly turned heavy as stone. The silver serpent tightened, not physically, but in her mind. She fell to her knees, visions spinning, her thoughts splintering like cracked glass. Screams echoed through the manor, not hers, but voices only she could hear. They spoke in old tongues, voices layered on voices, chanting names she didn't know. By morning, she was found in the rose garden, barefoot, eyes wide, humming a lullaby no one recognized, blood under her fingernails. She never recovered. The incident was hushed. Officially, she had suffered a feminine ailment of the mind. Unofficially, the necklace vanished again, locked away in the manor's deepest vault, beneath runes of silencing and walls lined with goblin-forged lead. Only 3 people knew where it now lay. Abraxas Malfoy, the stern-faced patriarch of the early 20th century, his confidant, the shrewd Narcissa Black, and years later Lucius Malfoy himself, who claimed the heirlooms with the cold elegance that seemed bred into his bones. Lucius, though prideful, respected the power of cursed objects. He had once warned Draco, in a rare moment of fatherly sternness, "Not all that glitters in our vault is gold. Some of it is vengeance wearing a smile." It was one of the few times Lucius referred to family history without condescension or sarcasm. That Draco remembered it vividly is telling. In one of her private letters to her sister Bellatrix, Narcissa once wrote, "There are trinkets in this house that I do not touch. They breathe when the room is still, and the silver of that serpent has turned darker since Lucius last held it. I sometimes wonder if it watches me." The letter, found decades later among Bellatrix's belongings, adds another thread to the legend. Could the necklace have a will of its own? An obscure record from Borgin and Burke's, dated 1784, mentions a Malfoy heirloom of unholy craftsmanship, brought in by a man with fine gloves and a sickly pallor. The item was never sold. The man, believed by some to be Cassian Malfoy, an elusive cousin who dabbled in forbidden enchantments, returned for it within the week, offering a hefty bribe for silence. The object's description matches that of Nocturna's collar. The Ministry of Magic was never officially involved, though a memo from 1871, found buried in the Department of Mysteries, makes an offhand reference to the Rosier case and a suspected bloodline curse tied to Malfoy relics. The memo is unsigned, but the handwriting matches that of Orestes Travers, a high-ranking unspeakable with an interest in hereditary magic. Whether Travers tried to investigate further or was silenced remains unknown. Even Lord Voldemort, in his relentless search for objects of power, is rumoured to have turned away from the Nocturna necklace. In an unused passage from an early draft of J.K. Rowling's writing notes, he is quoted as saying, "I do not trust magic older than I am, especially not when it smells like heartbreak." The line never made it into the books, but Rowling later hinted that Voldemort's disdain for love-based curses was part of why he ignored certain artifacts, even those steeped in dark enchantments. The tale resurfaced in hushed tones during the Second Wizarding War. A young Aura trainee, Callum Warwick, recalled during an interview for the Daily Prophet's 2012 retrospective, "We raided Malfoy Manor after the war. Most of the vaults were sealed tight. But there was one chamber, colder than the rest. It reeked of frost and perfume. There was a box, wrapped in dragon hide. I touched it, and my nose started bleeding instantly. They told me to leave it. Said it was family-bound. That's when I realized some things aren't protected by magic spells, they're protected by vengeance." The Nocturna necklace remains, by all known accounts, in Malfoy possession. It has never been shown in any exhibition, nor listed in the official Malfoy family inventory made public after the war. Rumours persist that Narcissa had it moved to an undisclosed location, possibly hidden among Black family relics, or perhaps buried deep in Gringotts under a pseudonym account. No one can say for certain. Interestingly, the curse appears to be selective. Only those who are not Malfoys by blood or bond, as Morwenna's original curse dictated, suffer its wrath. When Lucius once placed it around Narcissa's neck during a Yule celebration in 1981, she felt only a chill and the faint whisper of a tune she could not name. But she was unharmed. It was like being kissed by a ghost, she later said to Andromeda, during a strained conversation years later. A cold, sad kiss, but not painful, not harmful, almost mournful. The sadness of the necklace may come from Morwenna's own fate. Her death was never recorded. Some believe she became a banshee haunting the coasts of Tintagel. Others say she drowned herself the night Septimus married another, a French witch of noble stock who never bore him children. A single journal entry from Septimus's brother Cassius mentions the wedding. He wed Elodie Leclerc, but the night was cursed. I saw a gull drop dead in flight. The sea did not sing. The very serpent pendant has its own legend. Forged from the silver of a moonlit cauldron, the pendant was believed to contain a sliver of Morwenna's own hair. woven through an old binding charm known as the Vox Caelestis, a form of magic outlawed by the 17th century. This spell supposedly ties emotion into metal, causing the object to absorb and project the creator's last feelings. In this case, rejection, wrath, sorrow. Some magical historians have argued that the curse is not malevolent in the traditional sense. "It does not kill," wrote Professor Ignatius Porridge of the Royal Institute of Magical Curses, "but rather it remembers. It passes judgment only on those who forget the sin that birthed it." In this interpretation, the necklace is not a weapon, but a warning, a relic of broken promises. The irony is not lost on many that the Malfoys, with all their disdain for those they consider beneath them, guard this object so fiercely. In a family that prides itself on appearances and control, the Nocturna necklace is a crack in the marble, a reminder that even the highborn are not immune to the consequences of cruelty. And yet, despite everything, the necklace remains an object of fascination. A sketch appears in Dark Relics of the Old Houses by Edith Stroud, published in 1997. A shadowy pendant, coiled like a serpent around a bleeding pearl, annotated with the words, "Handle with truth." Whether Edith saw the real artifact or merely heard the legend, she refused to say. When asked in an interview in 2002, she replied, "Some things should stay buried, and some things choose to remain awake. It is said that on certain nights, if you stand before the ancestral cabinet in the west wing of Malfoy Manor, you can still hear something breathing. Not a person, not a creature, but a weight in the air, a sadness laced with fury, the whisper of a woman wronged, and the echo of silver links coiling against cold skin." Number 22. Centuries-long conflict with goblins. The Malfoys and the goblins had never been on friendly terms. For centuries, their relationship was marred by suspicion, betrayal, and a long chain of grievances passed from father to son. From the earliest recorded mentions of the Malfoy family in the archives of the Wizengamot, there were whispers of bitter disputes with Gringotts goblin elders. It wasn't simply about money or status, though the Malfoys were obsessed with both. It was about ownership, legacy, and pride. The kind of pride that doesn't fade, even after a dozen generations. One of the oldest stories told in hushed tones within Malfoy Manor revolved around Septimus Malfoy, a stern and calculating wizard who lived during the reign of Minister Eldritch Diggory. Septimus had entrusted a set of enchanted goblets, forged during the early Goblin rebellions, to Gringotts for safekeeping. The goblets were rumoured to reveal the truth when wine was poured into them, tools of ancient diplomacy and deception. But when Septimus returned decades later with proof of his claim, the goblets were gone. The goblins insisted the items had been legally claimed due to unpaid fees. Septimus left the bank that day with trembling hands and white-knuckled fists. He never stepped foot in Gringotts again. Generations later, Abraxas Malfoy, father of Lucius, tried to rekindle diplomatic ties with the Goblin nation, hoping to recover not only the goblets, but other family heirlooms believed to be kept in the deepest vaults. Abraxas believed in the power of charm and political influence. He invited the Goblin ambassador Grobbelnook to the manor in Wiltshire. Wine was poured, rare jewels exchanged, and for a brief time there was hope. But negotiations broke down when Grobbelnook produced a parchment dated 1731, signed allegedly by Cassius Malfoy, relinquishing rights to the disputed items. Abraxas, humiliated, publicly called it a forgery. The goblins responded by freezing all Malfoy accounts for inflammatory behavior. Lucius Malfoy inherited not just the family estate, but this legacy of distrust. By the time he rose to prominence in the Ministry of Magic, the Malfoys no longer stored any major valuables in Gringotts. Instead, Enchanted vaults within the manor, sealed by blood spells and cursed runes, held their true treasures. The goblins, for their part, viewed this as an insult to their ancient institution. The Malfoys, in their eyes, were nothing but hoarders with superiority complexes. Lucius, ever calculating, didn't keep his animosity a secret. During a heated conversation with Bartemius Crouch Sr., overheard by a Department of Magical Law Enforcement clerk, Lucius said, "I trust a Niffler more than a goblin with gold. At least you know the beast is only after shine." He made regular appearances at Wizengamot hearings where he subtly undermined goblin petitions for broader economic rights, always smiling, always polite, but always blocking them. Yet the most telling incident came during the investigation following Voldemort's first fall. Lucius, fearing that the Ministry might one day raid his vaults, moved a number of artifacts, some of them quite dark, to Gringotts under a false name. When war broke out again, and Gringotts fell under the control of Lord Voldemort's followers, Lucius saw his chance to retrieve not only his hidden possessions, but others he believed belonged to his family. But he was not prepared for the goblin named Ragnok. Ragnok, a proud goblin archivist, had long studied the disputed items in Gringotts, especially one ancient object, the Blade of Righteous Claim. This dagger, set with a blood-red ruby, was believed by some goblins to have been stolen during the 1612 Goblin Rebellion. The Malfoys insisted it was gifted to them by a grateful goblin smith centuries ago. Ragnok wasn't convinced. When Lucius sent emissaries to reclaim the dagger in 1997, Ragnok refused and sent back a chilling message. "The blade remembers blood. If it cuts a thief, the truth will speak." This infuriated Lucius, who saw Ragnok's words as a personal insult. But he couldn't act publicly. Instead, he tried to exploit the bank's new leadership, Death Eaters like Travers, who were using Gringotts as a war machine. Lucius demanded access to the deepest vaults, but even then the goblins remained fiercely independent. "We serve gold, not wands," Griphook famously said during this time. Though he later betrayed the bank by helping Harry Potter, his words reflected centuries of goblin pride. One vault in particular played a crucial role in this saga, the Lestrange Vault, where Helga Hufflepuff's cup was hidden. Though not a Malfoy vault, Lucius had shown suspicious interest in its contents long before the trio broke in. Some believed Lucius suspected that among the treasures stolen and stored in that vault were items once claimed by the Malfoys. Narcissa's cousin Bellatrix was furious when Lucius even hinted at such a thing. There were also rumours about a special ledger within Gringotts, a scroll locked in a goblin-only chamber listing all disputed claims. On this list, the name Malfoy appeared more than any other wizarding family. No one outside goblinkind had ever seen it, but tales whispered that it catalogued over 30 separate items claimed by the Malfoys and refuted by goblins. Some said this list was passed down from one goblin chief to another like a record of shame. Draco Malfoy, growing up in the shadow of these feuds, was taught from an early age never to trust goblins. He once told Theodore Nott in their 5th year at Hogwarts, "A goblin would sell your wand while you're still holding it." These weren't casual prejudices, they were family doctrine. But Draco, unlike his father and grandfather, would come to view this bitterness differently. After the Second Wizarding War, with the Malfoy name in disgrace and their assets frozen or scrutinized, Draco found himself in quiet correspondence with a goblin scholar named Gorvax. Gorvax, who had worked in the bank during the war and despised what Voldemort had done, saw in Draco not an enemy, but a confused heir. He wrote, "If you want to understand us, stop seeing us as bankers. We are historians who happen to guard gold." These letters would later be found in the Malfoy family archives, along with half-finished sketches of the artifacts Draco hoped to study, not possess. One day, Gorvax offered to show Draco the replica of the Blade of Righteous Claim, stored in a private collection outside the bank. Draco, now estranged from his family's obsession with dominance, accepted the invitation. The meeting didn't restore the Malfoy-Goblin relationship, but it was the first peaceful exchange in over 200 years. Draco, after seeing the blade and learning of its bloody past, reportedly said, "Perhaps the truth isn't in who held it, but in what it caused." Even so, the damage done over generations could not be undone in one act. The Malfoys remained outsiders in Goblin society. Their name, while still powerful in pureblood circles, was regarded with contempt in Goblin records. A Gringotts security officer once remarked, "The Malfoys walk like they own magic. That's their curse. They forget that we shaped its gold." Among the many items still under dispute is the crystal eye of Saphiron, a seeing stone once owned by the Goblin sage Mictha. The Malfoys claim that their ancestor, Lucien Malfoy, won it fairly in a duel during the 1709 uprising. Goblin historians insist it was looted from a sanctuary. Lucius tried several times to retrieve it, even offering 10 dragon eggs and a signed pledge of neutrality. The Goblins refused. "No amount of gold can buy what was taken in fire," said the Goblin curator during the last negotiation. In private, Lucius grew bitterer with every failed attempt. He began referring to the Goblins as the silent thieves of history, a phrase that appeared in several of his personal letters now kept at the Department of Magical Artifacts. But his bitterness was less about greed and more about defeat. The Malfoys, used to winning, had found an opponent who could not be bribed, bullied, or outmaneuvered. Years later, when Lucius was asked during a private Wizengamot hearing about Gringotts, he reportedly said, "It's a fortress pretending to be a bank, but make no mistake, its heart beats with grudges, not ledgers." He died with many of those grudges unresolved, and the Goblins held no public ceremony to mark his passing, unlike other wizards of note. The tale of the Malfoys and the Goblins is not just about property or pride, it is a tale of legacy, where two powerful entities collided and refused to yield. In the end, both sides lost something. The Goblins lost trust in wizarding diplomacy. The Malfoys lost the illusion that power could secure everything. As for the disputed artifacts, they remain, mostly untouched, in the depths of Gringotts, watched by silent eyes, surrounded by magic older than any Malfoy ever dreamed. And to this day there is a saying among certain Goblins in the bank: "If you see a Malfoy walking toward the vaults, count your fingers when he leaves." Whether said in jest or warning, it carries the weight of centuries. Number 23. Underground tunnels beneath the Manor. Beneath the opulent marble floors and towering columns of Malfoy Manor lies a world few have ever seen, one cloaked in darkness, secrecy, and the whispers of history. These are the hidden tunnels, carved from stone and silence, stretching like a serpent's spine through the earth under Wiltshire. The Malfoys, known for their wealth and power, have always guarded their secrets well, but the underground passageways beneath their estate reveal a far older story than many suspect, a story rooted in survival, ambition, and sometimes fear. It is said that the first tunnel was commissioned by Armand Malfoy himself, the French-born wizard who settled in Britain after the Norman invasion. While Armand is remembered in wizarding circles as a powerful sorcerer and early political influencer, few realize he was also a paranoid man. The young Malfoy, wary of Muggle rebellions and jealous rivals in the magical world, designed the earliest tunnel as a means of swift escape. According to the Journal of Wizarding historian Phineas Blackthorne, Armand Malfoy took no step forward without preparing 3 backward. He saw betrayal in every shadow, and the earth itself became his most trusted ally. The first passage was rudimentary, a single narrow corridor leading from the Manor's wine cellar to the edge of the Wiltshire forest. It allowed Armand to disappear into the trees if ever his political schemes turned against him. Over the years, the passage was improved, fortified with enchantments that kept it hidden from both Muggle and magical detection. When Salazar Slytherin himself visited Malfoy Manor in 1104, he allegedly commented, "You build below as if you fear the sky will fall. Wise, fear in your bloodline may yet save it." By the time the manor passed to Octavius Malfoy in the 1600s, the single tunnel had already multiplied into a network. Octavius, an unscrupulous man known for hosting illicit dueling matches and collecting dark artifacts, expanded the underground system to facilitate the smuggling of cursed objects. One of these objects, a mirror from the ruins of Carthage, was so dangerous that it had to be moved under cover of night through 3 concealed routes. Octavius boasted in a letter to his associate Violetta Crowley, "No aura can trace what walks beneath stone. The ground is faithful where men are not." The existence of these tunnels remained mostly legend until the time of Lucius Malfoy, who, as the world knows, danced the edge between wealth and corruption with elegant ease. During the height of Voldemort's return, Malfoy Manor became a dark sanctuary for the Death Eaters, a place where plans were whispered over fires, where prisoners cried behind velvet curtains. But what few knew was that the real fortress lay not in the grand halls, but below. Bellatrix Lestrange, mad and devoted, was one of the few to speak of the tunnels openly, though always with a deranged smile. "We don't need flue powder," she once told Fenrir Greyback. "We can crawl like snakes through the earth. That's the old way. That's the Malfoy way." Her words were dismissed by most, but Greyback later confessed to an unspeakable that he had indeed followed Lucius through a hidden trapdoor concealed under the eastern parlour rug. The tunnel led to a clearing in the woods near a place where, oddly enough, not even owls would fly. One of the more disturbing tales comes from Draco Malfoy's 6th year at Hogwarts, when he was tasked with allowing Death Eaters to enter the school. While most recall that he used the vanishing cabinet in the room of requirement, few know that he had rehearsed his movements using the tunnels under his home. According to a confiscated letter addressed to Severus Snape, Draco wrote, "Father says I must learn every corner of the dark. He walked those tunnels for years. He said they make a man brave or broken." Draco was only 16, but already the Manor's legacy was shaping him in stone and shadow. In 1998, when Harry, Ron, and Hermione were captured and brought to Malfoy Manor, they were imprisoned in the cellar. What they did not realize was that just meters from them, hidden behind an illusionary wall, lay one of the oldest exits in the tunnel system. Dobby, the house elf, clever as he was, may have known. He seemed to appear and disappear with strange precision. "I've been here before," he told Luna. "Dobby knows the way. The tunnels are more than just escape routes." According to a study conducted by the Department of Magical Infrastructure, an obscure branch of the ministry, one of the corridors leads directly to an underground spring rumoured to have healing properties. The spring, hidden in a cavern lined with serpent carvings, is protected by spells in Parseltongue, suggesting a link between the Malfoys and Slytherin's descendants. When interrogated after the war, Lucius Malfoy refused to comment. His only reply was, "The past should remain buried, especially when it breathes." But the tunnels do not merely connect places, they connect histories. A branch extends westward, supposedly linking to a forgotten manor once belonging to the Lestrange family. Another leads to an old Roman temple buried beneath the soil, where magical rites were once performed in secret. Xenophilius Lovegood, ever the seeker of the strange, claimed that he once found an entrance to the tunnels during a camping trip. "It smelled of cinnamon and rot," he told the Quibbler, and the walls whispered Latin curses. When the ministry seized Malfoy Manor after the Battle of Hogwarts, several officials went missing during inspections. One of them, Officer Miriam Stokes, vanished while cataloguing cursed objects in the wine cellar. Her last note read, "Strange breeze, wall feels wrong." Her body was never found. In response, Minister Kingsley Shacklebolt ordered all lower levels of the manor sealed with permanent locking charms. Despite that, rumours persist. Magical cartographers speak in hushed tones of the ghost map, a parchment that reveals the tunnel's paths passed from one generation of Malfoys to the next. It is said to be inked with dragon's blood and sealed with a drop of the builder's own. One scholar, Elphias Doge, mentioned it once in a footnote. The map exists, I believe. I saw Draco holding a torn page once, and he looked pale, as if the path it described led not just through stone, but through judgment. Lucius Malfoy, in his older years, rarely spoke of the war, but once, under the influence of a truth potion during a hearing, he muttered, "We thought we were kings under the earth, but kings still fall when the ceilings collapse." The hearing was adjourned shortly after, and the transcript redacted. Still, whispers of that quote float in legal circles like a curse, refusing to fade. In the post-war years, Draco Malfoy returned to the manor with his wife Astoria. He had the tunnels warded, not destroyed. "They're part of the blood," he told a journalist from the Daily Prophet. "You don't erase blood, you try to guide it." He never confirmed how often he used them, but house elves were sometimes seen entering strange nooks in the cellar and not returning for hours. Some of the tunnels may have collapsed. Wiltshire's earthquakes in 2007 revealed a stone arch with the Malfoy crest buried beneath a barn 10 miles from the estate. No one could explain how it had gotten there. A local farmer claimed he saw silver-robed figures vanish into the woods the night before the tremor. When questioned, he simply said, "They will look like ghosts of nobility, like the past walking too close. There are legends of one tunnel that leads nowhere, or rather, leads inward. A cursed passage that loops endlessly unless one carries a family relic." Narcissa Malfoy was once seen carrying an antique mirror through the cellar, muttering, "It's the only way to reach him." No one knows who him was, but some believe it was Abraxas Malfoy, who died of dragonpox, yet is said to have performed his last ritual underground. A ritual no one in the family dares repeat. The tunnels have become something of a myth among young Hogwarts students who dare each other to find secret entrances, but all attempts have failed. The stone recognizes only Malfoy blood, or so the story goes. As Horace Slughorn once joked, you can buy influence, you can even buy respect, but the trust of a tunnel, that's inherited. Today the manor stands as a symbol of a family attempting redemption. But the earth beneath it remembers. The tunnels, silent and patient, carry the weight of centuries. They are paths of escape, of betrayal, of ambition. They have seen lovers flee, enemies vanish, and curses bloom. And though no public records officially acknowledge them, they remain, coiled in the dirt like waiting serpents, not quite forgotten, not quite dead, only sleeping. And the question remains, if the tunnels were built to escape danger, what kind of danger did the Malfoys expect to come from above? Or was it, perhaps, something far older, something already beneath? Number 24, Influence over Dementors. Lucius Malfoy stood on the grey shores of Azkaban, his silver cane tapping against the stone as if announcing his presence to the sea itself. The guards made no move to restrain him. No one did. Despite being a known Death Eater, though slippery enough to escape conviction, Lucius Malfoy had an eerie rapport with the Ministry's darkest allies, the Dementors. They glided past him, their hollow faces mere inches from his own, yet he didn't shiver. Others would collapse under the weight of their memories, their joy sucked out by invisible fangs. But Lucius? He remained untouched. Some claimed he had no joy left to steal. Others whispered something far darker, that he had learned how to bend them, at least slightly, to his will. "It is not a matter of control," Lucius once reportedly said in a private gathering of the Sacred 28. "It is a matter of understanding." And that phrase became something of a legend within select pure-blood circles. What did it mean to understand a Dementor? Could one speak to them, make bargains, manipulate them the way one might negotiate with goblins or command house elves? The truth, as elusive as it was chilling, found its roots in a deeper web of power, one tied not only to Lucius, but to the long, haunted history of the Malfoy family. There were accounts, hushed and scattered, of Abraxas Malfoy, Lucius's father, visiting the original cells of Nurmengard long before Azkaban became the sole fortress of imprisonment. There, too, Dementors once lingered. Guards noticed the strange way Abraxas seemed drawn to their presence, like a scholar fascinated by a predator he believed he could tame. "You should have seen him," muttered an old aura, Bennington Hales, in a faded memory recorded in the Wizengamot archives. "He walked through them like they were smoke, never flinched, as if they could smell something on him, something they recognized." The Malfoy estate itself wasn't free of strange occurrences. The dungeons beneath Malfoy Manor, spacious, cold, with damp stone walls, were said to have once held more than just political prisoners. A travelling curse-breaker from Albania, named Vasilije Petrovich, once claimed, in a letter smuggled to Dumbledore, that he had sensed Dementor traces deep in those halls. Residual emotion, he called it. Fear clings to the stones like oil. And something older, something trained. Lucius's unusual visits to Azkaban raised questions even within the ministry. Most wizards requested protective charms or Patronus escorts to enter, yet Lucius never asked for either. A clerk named Eleanor Drummond once recorded in her logbook that Lucius entered the prison bare-handed without any evident shielding enchantment and left hours later, paler than usual but unshaken. What purpose did these visits serve? Officially, he claimed to be delivering legal documents on behalf of his lawyer or checking on distant acquaintances, but whispers grew louder in corridors where secrets brewed. "Dementors don't listen," insisted Kingsley Shacklebolt once, after a private inquiry into one of Lucius's visits. "They feel, and if they felt something in him, something familiar, that's not a comfort, that's a warning." It was during the First Wizarding War that the rumours truly began to spread. Voldemort had yet to formally command the Dementors, but the creatures had grown bolder. They didn't simply guard, they hunted. Some claimed that during raids they would appear where no one expected them, floating silently through the shadows of wizarding villages. In Wiltshire, near the edge of the Malfoy estate, 3 families vanished in a single week. Only one child survived, broken, wordless, and forever unable to speak. The only thing he would ever draw were faceless, hooded shapes. Lucius had, of course, been seen nearby that night. Merely a social visit, he claimed, but few believed it. Snape once said, "There are magics even the Dark Lord did not master, potions that affect not the body, but the soul." If anyone had studied such things, it was the Malfoys. With their wealth, access to forbidden libraries, and long-held relationships with darker bloodlines, it was not impossible they had found ways to communicate, or perhaps entice, the Dementors. The most damning story came not from an enemy, but a reluctant friend. Narcissa Malfoy once confided, under the effects of veritaserum during a ministry investigation, that Lucius kept a mirror in the west wing of their manor. It was always covered. She never dared to look into it. "When he speaks to it," she whispered, "the room gets cold. The candles go out. I hear wind, though there are no windows, and sometimes I think something is whispering back. Could it have been a Dementor bound through some unknown charm, or something else entirely, drawn by the same dark force that powered the Azkaban Guardians? Dumbledore, though never explicitly accusing Lucius, once said to Harry, "Fear and fascination often come hand in hand, and those who think they can command darkness are often the ones most consumed by it." He said this after Harry's encounter with the Dementors on the Hogwarts Express, when the creatures showed no mercy to anyone except, curiously, Draco Malfoy. Draco's composure during that attack was suspicious. While the other students trembled and collapsed, he remained unusually calm. "They didn't touch me," Draco later told Crabbe. "Must have known who my father was." He smirked, but in that smirk, something deeper trembled. Pride, yes, but also fear. In a rarely read footnote in Secrets of the Darkest Art, a line stands out. "There are families who do not fear the Dementor's kiss, for their blood is steeped in shadows darker than what the soul can reveal." It was Lucius's final fall from grace that brought the theory back into public conversation. After the Second Wizarding War, when Voldemort was vanquished and the Dementors removed from Azkaban's service, Lucius was tried and publicly humiliated. But during the trials, a strange phenomenon occurred. The magical quill that recorded courtroom transcripts began malfunctioning whenever Dementors were mentioned in his testimony. It scratched unreadable symbols, ink bleeding off the page. The court clerk replaced it 3 times. Eventually, they simply stopped asking about the creatures. "That's not coincidence," said Hermione Granger, later recalling the trial. "That's interference, and that sort of interference requires very old, very dark magic." Theories range from magical contracts made by the Malfoys with the early founders of Azkaban to the presence of cursed relics within their manor that allowed them influence. One such artifact, a silver locket bearing the Malfoy crest and carved runes associated with emotion manipulation, was found buried beneath the floorboards of their East Wing during a renovation in 2005. When tested by a team of cursebreakers, the locket emitted a chill so intense that one of them collapsed from memory-induced trauma. His last words before passing out were, "They're here. I can feel them." Even after the Dementors were supposedly banished from Azkaban and restricted to uninhabited northern territories, reports of their sightings near Malfoy Manor persisted. Auras were dispatched multiple times. Nothing was ever found, but the cold lingered in the air long after they left. Could it be that the Malfoys never truly controlled the Dementors, but instead fed them? Gave them something no one else dared to give. A pact made generations ago, sealed not with wands, but with emotion, with fear, with silence. In the end, what terrified people most was not the question of whether Lucius Malfoy controlled the Dementors. It was the possibility that the Dementors had chosen him. They say evil recognizes its own. And when a creature without a soul looks into the eyes of a man like Lucius Malfoy and does not feed, one must wonder, what darkness lies in that man so deep, so empty, that even a Dementor finds nothing left to take? Perhaps the most chilling words come not from a witch or a wizard, but from a prisoner once held in Azkaban, a man named Dirk Cresswell. "They came for me every night," he wrote in the final page of a torn diary found in the ruins of Cell 13. "I screamed, begged, forgot my name. But then one day they stopped. I asked why. And one of the guards laughed. 'Lucius is here,' he said. They're listening to him now. There are no official documents, no signed confessions, no ministry proclamations confirming the Malfoys' bond with the Dementors. But in the cold corners of wizarding lore, in half-burned books and unspoken fears, the story continues to grow. And as long as the Dementors still glide through forgotten forests and cursed ruins, someone will always whisper, "The Malfoys understood them." And perhaps, just perhaps, the Dementors whispered back. Number 25. Secret Family Spells. In the deep halls of Malfoy Manor, where silence stretches like velvet over marble floors, there exists a room that no guest has ever entered. It's not hidden by charms or passwords, but rather by generations of dread. This room, carved into the very stone of Wiltshire's underbelly, holds what the Malfoy family cherishes most. Not gold, not portraits, not dark artifacts, but knowledge. And not just any knowledge, spells unique to their bloodline, whispered from father to son, mother to child, cloaked forever in shadow. Unlike other pureblood families that boast about their ancestry or parade their vaults in Gringotts, the Malfoys have always guarded their true power in secrecy. For them, legacy isn't about money or names in ministry records, it's about spells. Ancient, cruel, elegant magic passed down with the same reverence as family crests. Magic that doesn't appear in Hogwarts textbooks or in the restricted section of the library, but that leaves scars more lasting than any unforgivable curse. The most whispered about among these is a spell known only in frightened hush, obscuro sanguine. Latin-born, precise and chilling in every sense, this spell is said to freeze the blood in a wizard's veins, not fatally, not permanently, but long enough to cut him off from the wand as if he'd never held one. The victim doesn't fall unconscious. They remain painfully aware as their magic is suspended in a limbo, trapped beneath a layer of freezing silence in the bloodstream. It is a spell meant not to kill, but to humiliate, to disarm, to terrify. In 1956, Abraxas Malfoy was accused of using obscuro sanguine during a private duel with an upstart ministry official named Reginald Crouch, father to Barty Crouch, Sr. Reginald collapsed mid-spell, wand clattering to the ground, his lips moving without effect. Witnesses claimed his skin turned grey as ash and that he wept without tears. No magical trace was found afterward. Abraxas walked free. The case file still exists, buried deep in the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, but stamped with a crimson seal. Case closed. Lack of evidence. Lucius Malfoy, a man of poise and politics, never spoke openly of these spells. Yet in his private study, behind a bookshelf carved with serpents, he kept a black leather-bound tome. Not one of the dark arts books banned by the ministry, but a family record, spells written in slanting silver ink. According to Narcissa, who once referenced the book indirectly while speaking to Severus Snape, the real legacy isn't our name, it's what we remember in silence. During the First Wizarding War, Lucius allegedly used a spell known as Tenebris Noxa, the darkness of harm. It enveloped the target in a suffocating void, snatching away their 5 senses for a brief but excruciating time. Aurors who survived it described the sensation as being buried alive. "I couldn't hear, I couldn't breathe, I didn't even know if I had a body," wrote Emmeline Vance in her journal, discovered posthumously. She identified the attacker as Lucius, but refused to name the spell. "It wasn't from any book I've seen," she wrote. "It was older, crueler, personal." Family spells, by design, are deeply personal. The wand movements are intricate and don't respond well to imitation. That is what makes them powerful. Narcissa was said to have a charm called Speculum Cor, Mirror of the Heart, a probing spell, elegant and cruel, that let her peer into someone's emotions and memories, not as legilimency does, but more like dipping a brush into someone's soul. Bellatrix once called it a spell for aristocrats, laughing at its lack of bloodshed, but even she never dared to mimic it. Draco, though raised under the watchful eye of Lucius, was never taught obscuro sanguine. "Not until you understand why we use it," his father once told him, when Draco was 15 and already thirsting for power. The boy had overheard the name from a drunken house elf whispering to another. But Lucius knew that to teach such magic too early would destroy more than it would protect. Family spells are weapons, but they're also mirrors. They show the wielder who they truly are. Still, Draco's curiosity couldn't be smothered. In his 6th year at Hogwarts, during the height of his task from Voldemort, he attempted to recreate Obscuro Sanguine from notes he had stolen from his father's desk. The result was a disaster. Vincent Crabbe was his unwilling test subject. Though Draco never said the incantation aloud, his wand trembled in his hand as if the magic itself resisted him. Crabbe convulsed on the floor, unable to breathe for several seconds, screaming that his bones were turning to ice. Snape intervened in time. Draco never tried again. The key to such spells, according to the family creed, is intent. Not rage, not fear, but cold calculation. A Malfoy doesn't scream when casting, they whisper. That is why their spells are feared, not because of their brightness, but because of their quiet. Historians argue that the Malfoys may have inherited their spellcraft from earlier French bloodlines, possibly dating back to Isolde de la Noire, a 13th century witch who was said to enchant blood itself. Some scholars connect the roots of Obscuro Sanguine to her lost grimoire, Sang de Lune. The Malfoy, being of Norman descent, likely carried this magical knowledge across the Channel after the fall of pure-blood courts in France. But none of these theories are confirmed. And that is the Malfoy way. Leave just enough truth in the open for the rest to become legend. One of the lesser-known family spells is Veritas Umbrae, Truth of Shadows. Cast only in the presence of a wand-bearer who shares blood, it reveals a single hidden truth from their soul, often a painful one. Lucius used it on Draco once, just once. No one knows what it revealed, but after that day, Draco stopped sneering at the Weasleys in public. "We are not children," Lucius reportedly told him, "and magic is not a toy." In the Second Wizarding War, there were rumors that Narcissa used a forbidden binding spell to silence a captured Death Eater who had threatened to expose her secret alliance with Snape. The spell, called Limen Mortis, Threshold of Death, doesn't kill. It simply suspends the soul's communication with the body. The victim looks alive, even breathes, but cannot speak, move, or react. The effect lasts 3 days. The Death Eater, Travers, reappeared later in a daze, claiming he had been cursed by a ghost with blue fire. He never spoke of it again. Not all family spells are weapons, some are oaths. The Malfoys, being creatures of political survival, value loyalty in strange ways. One such spell is Vinculum Lux, a white gold ribbon of magic that binds 2 individuals to a single secret. If one breaks the silence, the other dies. It is said that Lucius and Snape cast this spell in the weeks before Voldemort returned to power. Whether true or not, Snape never revealed Lucius's secrets, even when he had every reason to. Curiously, no member of the Malfoy family has ever been charged with the use of illegal magic, despite clear signs. It is whispered in the ministry that Malfoy spells vanish without magical residue. Hermione Granger once said, "That's not how spells work," but Kingsley Shacklebolt, more grim, replied, "That's not how our spells work." The secrecy surrounding these spells is part of their power. They are not written in any known magical script, but inscribed with runes known only to the Malfoy bloodline, silver-inked, and passed on through whispered instruction. No pensive holds their memory. No book, other than the black leather-bound tome in Malfoy Manor, dares to record them. In a rare interview published in The Daily Prophet, Draco, now older and softened by time, was asked directly about the rumors of secret family magic. He smiled faintly and said, "Some families pass on photo albums, we pass on silence, and silence is a very useful spell, wouldn't you agree?" And so the legend grows. The Malfoys do not invent chaos, they refine it, they bottle it, they teach it not as a gift but as a burden. Their spells are not meant for spectacle but for legacy. They do not glow, they do not sing, they do not echo, but they change everything. Number 26. Secret friendship with vampires. It began, as most Malfoy secrets do, with silence thick as fog and shadows stitched into velvet curtains. In the east wing of Malfoy Manor, hidden behind a tapestry no living soul dared touch, lay a room untouched by time. Here, amidst shelves of brittle scrolls and sealed chests, was a book bound in dragon hide. It bore no title, only the sigil of the Malfoy family entwined with a blood-red thorn. This was the Chronicon Noctis, the Night Chronicle, and within it lived the tale of a pact darker than any Dementor's hunger. Coriolanus Malfoy, the great-grandfather of Lucius, was a man both feared and admired. Born in 1823, he came of age during a turbulent period of magical unrest. The Goblin rebellions had just subsided, but whispers of another war, one between creatures of the night and the wizarding world, bubbled beneath the surface. It was said Coriolanus had a taste for the dangerous, a mind as sharp as a basilisk fang, and a tongue dipped in honey and poison alike. He encountered them first on a diplomatic mission to the Carpathians, where he was sent by the Department of Magical Cooperation. His purpose was simple: to negotiate the return of stolen magical artifacts from local dark wizards. What he discovered instead were not criminals, but creatures older than empires. In the shadow of the Buchegi Mountains, hidden beneath a ruined monastery, he met Vladek du Sangre, patriarch of the Sangre clan of vampires. Vladek was unlike the gory tales that filled wizarding textbooks. He wore silks instead of rags, spoke French and Latin with ease, and quoted Ovid with the ease of a bored scholar. "We are not monsters," he told Coriolanus as they dined. Coriolanus on roasted venison, Vladek on something poured from a crystal decanter. "We are survivors, like you, like your family." Their alliance, as recorded in the Chronicon Noctis, was sealed under moonlight and blood. Coriolanus offered magical trinkets, time-turners smuggled from the Department of Mysteries, cursed amulets confiscated from dark wizards, and enchanted daggers forged by goblins. In return, the Sangre clan offered protection, intelligence from across Europe, and most importantly, silence. The ministry never suspected that Coriolanus's sudden rise to political prominence had less to do with luck and more with ancient fangs in the dark. The pact was maintained in whispers. When Coriolanus died in 1901, his son, Septimus Malfoy, inherited both his estate and his secrets. Septimus expanded the arrangement, building secret compartments in the manor where gifts could be stored until they were claimed by cloaked figures who arrived by moonless night. A portrait of Septimus still hangs in the Malfoy gallery, his gaze unnerving in its intensity. Some say his eyes seem to follow only at night. There are stories told by the oldest house elves, passed down in fear and reverence. One such tale tells of Lady Olympe Sangre, a vampire diplomat who visited Malfoy Manor in 1925. Dressed in mourning black with silver embroidery, she arrived unannounced during a storm, her carriage drawn by thestrals. She brought with her a relic, an obsidian mirror, said to reflect not your face, but your soul's true nature. It was a gift for Septimus's son Abraxas, then just a boy. "He will need to know what hides inside him," she said cryptically, before vanishing into the rain. Abraxas Malfoy, father of Lucius, kept the pact alive, but distanced himself from the more dangerous aspects. He was a politician, more interested in influence than in blood. Still, letters between him and Armand du Sangre, the new vampire lord, show a relationship of strategic alliance. One such letter, dated 1962 and stored in the Department of Mysteries under Restricted Correspondences, reads, "The minister is blind to what hunts the borders. I trust your people will keep the Transylvanian gate closed until the summit." Enclosed are 2 talismans freshly unbound. Lucius Malfoy grew up surrounded by remnants of this uneasy friendship. As a boy, he was told never to open the East Wing's 3rd corridor. He would often see strange visitors in the dead of night, their eyes glowing faintly, speaking to his father in languages he didn't recognize. The vampire guests were polite, but unnerving. One, Elias Sangre, once patted young Lucius on the head and said, "You have your grandfather's cunning. I wonder if you also have his courage." But things began to change as the wizarding world grew more connected and more watched. By the 1980s, under increasing scrutiny from the ministry, maintaining ties with vampires, especially powerful rogue clans, was considered a direct violation of international magical law. Vampires were classified as Class 5 dark beings, and anyone caught in communication with them could face Azkaban. The risks outweighed the benefits. Lucius, always the pragmatist, saw the writing on the wall. By the time he rose to prominence under Voldemort, he had severed most of the Malfoy ties with the Sangre clan, not because of morality, but strategy. "Their time is over," he once told Narcissa, as recorded in her private journal. "They are relics of a darker age. Our future lies elsewhere." Yet, it was not an easy break. The Sangre clan, especially Elias, considered the Malfoys bound by blood and magic. When Lucius declined their request for sanctuary during the vampire purge of 1993, they took it as betrayal. One evening, Malfoy Manor's wards were tested by dark forces. A single black rose was left on the doorstep, its petals still wet with blood. Lucius burned it without a word. It is believed that during the Second Wizarding War, the Sangre clan watched from the shadows but never interfered. They neither supported Voldemort nor the Order. They had once served a family that now turned its back. Their vengeance was not loud, it was patient. A specific incident still circulates in whispered legend among surviving Death Eaters. In 1997, during a skirmish in Nocturne Alley, a masked vampire intervened, not to help, but to stand between Lucius and a pursuing aura. He disarmed the aura, nodded at Lucius, and vanished. Later, Lucius would mutter, "He looked like Coriolanus," and say no more. From the books, one line offers a faint echo of this legacy. In Half-Blood Prince, when Dumbledore warns Harry about trusting easily, he says, "Even families with long-standing reputations can hold darker truths than the ones they parade." Many fans believe this was Rowling's subtle nod to the hidden vampire ties. It is easy to paint Lucius as a man of pure ambition, but the truth is far more layered. He was heir to a legacy that danced between nobility and monstrosity. The Sangre vampires were never merely allies, they were reflections, dark mirrors to the Malfoys' own hunger for power, control, and survival at any cost. The final record in the Chronicon Noctis is dated 1999, a year after Voldemort's fall. It is written in Lucius's hand and sealed with his wax sigil. The page is stained with wine, or perhaps something darker. The entry reads, "I have seen what loyalty demands. It is too steep a price. Let this be the last page of an old book. I do not wish my grandson to carry this weight." And so the secret ended, or so Lucius intended. But some doors, once opened, never truly close. The Sangre clan still exists, now dispersed and hidden in old crypts and abandoned castles. Occasionally, their name appears in odd corners of the magical world. an anonymous donation to St. Mungo's, a rare blood-red potion at Borgin and Berks, a book authored under the pseudonym V.S. Nocturne, found in the Forbidden section. Draco Malfoy, for his part, has never spoken publicly about the vampires, but it is said that in his private study he keeps a black rose pressed between the pages of an old book. No one knows where he got it, and so the story lingers like a dream you try to forget but which haunts your sleep. The Malfoys walked with monsters once, not out of fear, but alliance. And when the time came to choose, they closed the book but did not destroy it. After all, secrets are what the Malfoys do best. Number 27. Magical Laboratory beneath the Manor. Beneath the cold stone floors of Malfoy Manor, deeper than the catacombs where the family buried their dead, darker than the forbidden corridors of Durmstrang, there is said to exist a chamber that defies all the known rules of magic. It is not just a myth whispered among Hogwarts students or a legend passed between pages of conspiracy journals. It is a place some claim they've seen, if only for a flickering moment, through cracked doors and silencing charms. A secret magical laboratory buried beneath the foundations of one of the most feared, pure-blood families in Wizarding Britain. It was not in any official record, of course. The Ministry never acknowledged its existence, and even the most diligent Auror investigations were frustrated by the protective enchantments and legal obstacles surrounding the Malfoy estate. Yet certain names, often spoken with caution and half-truths, have always emerged when discussing the origins of certain magical phenomena, among them Lucius Malfoy, Thaddeus Rawle, and, whispered most fearfully, Septimus Gaunt. Together, if one believes the scattered records hidden in the Department of Mysteries, they formed what some call the Circle of the Void. This laboratory, according to unverified Auror testimony, was accessible only through a blood-bound door hidden behind a wall in the eastern cellar, a cellar conveniently left out of the original architectural blueprints submitted to the Ministry. When questioned in 1981 about inconsistencies in the Manor's structure, Lucius Malfoy replied coldly, "Not all secrets are meant for the Ministry's ledgers. Some are only for the blood that built them." The Ministry dropped the inquiry shortly after, citing a lack of evidence. No search warrant was ever approved. What was supposedly created there, in the candle-lit gloom and rune-marked chambers of that laboratory, is even more disturbing than its mystery. The tale of the Mirror of Morvala, an artifact confiscated during a raid in Nocturne Alley in 1998, offers one of the few concrete threads that might connect back to the Malfoy laboratory. The mirror, framed in serpent bone and veined with blackened silver, did not reflect images as mirrors should. It showed instead what the observer feared most, and worse, gave those fears shape and form if the viewer stood before it for too long. When questioned about the mirror, an anonymous source within the Department of Magical Accidents and Catastrophes claimed, "The enchantments on the frame matched the theory of binding souls through reflective materials, a technique banned in the 17th century. There are only 3 known texts that explain it, and all 3 are missing from the Hogwarts library, but reportedly available in the private collection of the Malfoys. No charges were ever brought." One of the most curious incidents tied to this place involves Severus Snape. During the First Wizarding War, when Snape was still loyal to the Dark Lord, he allegedly spent 3 nights at the Malfoy estate, nights that did not pass unnoticed. Narcissa Malfoy reportedly told Bellatrix he came out pale as a ghost and would not speak for hours. Lucius told me he was perfecting a potion of severed memory. I dare not ask more. The quote appears in an intercepted letter dated 1979, found among Bellatrix Lestrange's effects after her death. The concept of a potion that could surgically remove memories without the use of obliviate was deemed impossible by magical scholars. And yet in 1995 a mysterious vial was recovered from the ruins of a Death Eater hideout in Wiltshire. It carried the unmistakable sigil of the Malfoy family, a serpent coiled around a silver rose, and when tested on a captured prisoner, resulted in the sudden and permanent erasure of 3 days of memory. No known spell was used, no curse could be traced. The vial was destroyed by the unspeakables who feared its implications. In another chilling story during the Second Wizarding War, Arthur Weasley confided in his son Bill about a rumour among the old Aurors. Arthur had been stationed near Wiltshire during his early career, and late one night he encountered a disoriented boy near the manor, dressed in Hogwarts robes but speaking in tongues. He kept repeating, "She won't let me go, the wall is breathing." He had no wand, and his mind, well, it was like something had turned it inside out, Arthur had said. The boy vanished the next morning. No record of his identity was ever found. The legend of the Malfoy laboratory has always been wrapped in silence, but among those who study cursed objects there is no ambiguity. Professor Damocles Belby, renowned potioneer, an Order of Merlin recipient, once said during a private lecture, "There are substances in this world that should not mix. Unicorn blood and powdered inferi bone, for instance. I once read of a potion brewed in the west wing of a manor I won't name, that combined those two. The result was not human anymore, but it still walked." His notes, later leaked, had the initials LM scribbled in the margins. Lucius Malfoy, even after his acquittal post-war, was never quite free of suspicion. His refusal to speak of certain years, specifically 1978 to 1981, only deepened the unease. When asked by a Daily Prophet reporter in 2001 about his rumoured involvement with experimental dark magic, he snapped, "My family's affairs are our own. I've served my time as scapegoat. I won't be made a spectacle again." The quote was redacted from the published article. But if the laboratory does exist, why has no one found it? Why has no magic, not even the Aura's most advanced detection charms, pierced the veil around the manor's secrets? The answer might lie in the words of an old house elf named Twindle, who served the Malfoys for nearly 90 years. Before his death in 1999, he whispered to a healer at St. Mungo's, "It's under the house, yes, but not in time. They moved it. They folded it like paper. You can't find what isn't there." His statement was dismissed as delirium. And yet his words match an obscure theory proposed by Bathilda Bagshot in one of her unpublished essays, that certain spaces, through the use of ancient Peveril geometry and bloodlock runes, could be hidden not in location but in temporal stasis, outside the normal flow of time. If the Malfoy laboratory was built using such a method, it would explain the absolute failure of detection attempts. You cannot breach what exists neither in present nor past. More than once, Draco Malfoy himself was spotted slipping into the cellar during the final years of the war. According to Astoria Greengrass, who once confided in her sister Daphne, Draco was obsessed with unlocking the Eastern Corridor. He said there was something left behind, a weapon, a name. When asked what name, she reportedly hesitated, then said, "Not Voldemort, worse. He called it the Morning Echo. Whether this was an object, a spell, or a person, no one knows." But in 2011, during renovations at Malfoy Manor, a worker reported hearing voices in a language he didn't recognize, coming from behind a bricked wall in the wine cellar. "I swear on Merlin's beard, it was like the stone was humming, my bones shook." He quit the next day. The room was sealed again without explanation. Perhaps most disturbing are the testimonies of Thorfinn Rowell, a known Death Eater, who, after Azkaban, spoke freely to anyone who'd listen. Lucius didn't just want power, he said. He wanted to bend the rules of nature, thought he could reverse death, split identity, freeze thought. He showed me once. This thing in a jar looked like a heart. But it had eyes, it blinked, said my name. When asked why he didn't tell the ministry, he answered, because I still dream of it. Some believe the laboratory is a cautionary tale, a twisted metaphor for the dangers of unchecked ambition. Others believe it is still active, accessible only to the last true Malfoy heir, and only if he is willing to finish what was started generations ago. As Draco Malfoy once said when asked if he believed his father was evil, he believed in legacy, and sometimes legacy takes you places you can't return from. In the end, the truth about the secret magical laboratory remains buried, perhaps in time, perhaps in death. But as long as objects like the Mirror of Morvala appear, and as long as wizards continue to vanish near Wiltshire, the legend breathes. And perhaps in the deepest silence of Malfoy Manor, it waits. Number 28. Missing Hogwarts artifacts. Few tales are whispered with more caution among the halls of Hogwarts than those involving the Malfoy name, and fewer still are spoken aloud when it comes to the missing artifacts of the school's ancient past. Not many outside the old wizarding families know this, but Lucius Malfoy was long suspected by several members of the Wizengamot Department of Magical Artifacts of being involved in the disappearance of priceless Hogwarts relics. These weren't ordinary trinkets. These were legendary items tied to the founders themselves, and some of them vanished during the most chaotic years of the First Wizarding War, when eyes were turned toward greater threats and the shadows were thick with deceit. The most famous of these objects was, undoubtedly, the original diadem of Rowena Ravenclaw, not the Horcrux destroyed by Harry Potter in the Room of Requirement, but the true, untouched original said to have been worn by Rowena herself during the founding of the school. According to the ancient records kept in the restricted section of the library, there were two such diadems, one imbued with Rowena's wisdom and the other purely ornamental, passed down ceremonially to her descendants. That second, ornamental one is believed to have been displayed in the headmaster's tower until the late 19th century, when it was quietly moved into the vaults for safekeeping. It vanished sometime around 1979, and many believe Lucius Malfoy acquired it, likely through bribery or blackmail. It was Professor Everard, a former headmaster, whose portrait still hangs in the head's office, who reportedly told Dumbledore in private, "I remember the day they locked it away. I was watching from my frame, and I remember a tall, pale man asking far too many questions about where the founder's items were stored. He had a serpent pin on his cloak." The description matched Lucius almost perfectly, though no official record of his presence at Hogwarts at the time exists. Dumbledore never commented on the matter, but after his death, the question was raised again during the rebuilding of the school. Another artifact that disappeared in those same years was a set of bound journals believed to have belonged to Salazar Slytherin himself. These weren't the cursed diary that once possessed Ginny Weasley, but rather genuine historical manuscripts written in an archaic form of Latin mixed with Parseltongue. They were kept under lock and spell in a small private room of the library once known only to the headmaster and the librarian. Madame Pince, when questioned by investigators years later, admitted with great reluctance. There was a burglary, quiet, clean, no signs of entry. But I knew something was missing. I could feel the empty shelf, humming with silence. At the time, Hogwarts was still reeling from the growing influence of the Dark Lord, and the theft was quietly buried to avoid panic. But several librarians in magical institutions, including Archibald Mulgrave at the British Wizarding Archives, noted that certain references to the Slytherin manuscripts began appearing in private collections and black market transactions. One in particular, the Green Testament, was a translation believed to be derived from Slytherin's original writings and bore notes in what appeared to be Lucius Malfoy's distinct cursive. The book vanished from Mulgrave's collection a week after he mentioned this to a colleague. Then there is the most obscure, and possibly most dangerous, of the missing items, the staff of Headmaster Berengarius Gorsedd, a mysterious figure from the 15th century, known for his radical experimentation with time magic and soul duplication. The staff was carved from white ash and embedded with a core of sphinx mane, a combination so rare it was believed to allow temporary anchoring of a wizard's consciousness outside of linear time. According to the records in the headmaster's log, Gorsedd's staff was sealed in a stone chest, protected by 7 layers of defensive enchantments, and buried beneath the school in a ritual chamber. When Ministry inspectors conducted a quiet audit of Hogwarts protected items in 1980, they found the chest cracked open, the runes burned black, and the staff missing. There were no signs of forced entry. The only magical signature left behind, faint and nearly erased, was of someone who had been educated in the art of unbinding wards from within. A signature consistent with the Malfoy family's ancestral spellcraft. But as always, no charges were brought. Lucius Malfoy, summoned for questioning, produced alibis and smiled coldly, saying only, "My interest in relics is historical. I leave theft to those less fortunate." The wizarding community, of course, is rife with rumors, but even rumors require substance to persist for decades. One such story came from an auror named Tiberius Knott, a man who had once patrolled Wiltshire and claimed to have seen with his own eyes a case of ancient artifacts in the eastern drawing room of Malfoy Manor. They were not copies, he said in a private interview years later. The diadem shimmered in that peculiar way Goblin silver does when it's infused with founder magic. I recognized the crest, Ravenclaw's bird, turned slightly to the left. That variant was never on the replicas. The case vanished days after Knott's visit. He was quietly transferred and forbidden to speak of the matter again. There are also whispers that Draco Malfoy in his youth was forbidden from entering certain rooms in the manor. In a rare confession to Blaise Zabini, overheard by a house elf and later repeated to Hermione Granger, Draco allegedly said, "There's a room under the library, and my father says it's just old family storage, but I've seen the glow under the door. Sometimes it hums like a living thing, or I think it's watching me." When Hermione attempted to investigate the claim in 2002, she found the lower levels of the manor magically sealed, protected by blood-locked enchantments too ancient to bypass. The question arises, if Lucius did indeed possess these artifacts, why keep them? Why not use them during the war, or sell them or turn them over in exchange for leniency after Voldemort's fall? The answer may lie in the Malfoy family's obsession with legacy. Lucius did not see these items as weapons. He saw them as proof. Proof that his bloodline had surpassed even the founders in power and in secrecy. As he once said, recorded by a court scribe during his 1996 testimony, "A man's wealth is not in gold, it is in what he hides and what no one else can touch." One particularly eerie account comes from Dolores Umbridge, who once dined at Malfoy Manor during her brief tenure at the ministry. According to her own memoirs, Truth in Pink, she wrote, "Lucius excused himself midway through dinner to fetch a rare bottle of elf wine. He was gone 20 minutes. When I followed, worried for his safety naturally, I found him speaking to something in a glass case. There was no wine, only a strange, ancient headdress and a flickering wand that gave off an almost human pulse. She never returned to the manor again." It is worth noting that the Department of Magical Artifacts quietly reopened their investigation into the missing items in 2004, spurred by the emergence of a magical staff for sale in the black market circles of Bucharest. Though crudely disguised, the staff matched Gorsedd's in every detail, including the unique spiral burn down the shaft, which historians believed symbolized his attempts to twist time. The cellar disappeared 2 days before interrogation. The staff was never recovered, and still no search of Malfoy Manor has ever revealed these artifacts. Each attempt is met with a wall of lawyers, ministry red tape, and subtle threats. A former unspeakable, speaking under a glamour charm, revealed that a team once tried to scry the location of the diadem using the orb of Aethusa. The orb exploded. "Too much shielding," he said. "They didn't want to just hide it. They wanted to erase the very idea of it. Even portraits in the Malfoy home refused to speak. A painting of Lucius' great-grandfather, Cygnus Malfoy, known for his vanity and talkativeness, went completely mute when questioned by ministry officials. He only offered a smirk and pointed toward the floorboards before fading into his frame and refusing to reappear. The officials took it as a malfunction, but old portraits rarely malfunction on their own. Still, the theories persist. Some say the diadem grants Lucius extended life and sharpened wit, allowing him to manipulate the ministry long after the war. Others claim the journals of Slytherin were used to develop the failed blood rituals found in abandoned safe houses after Voldemort's fall. The staff, some insist, may be the reason Lucius still walks without limp or age, untouched by Azkaban's rot despite his time within. When questioned once more in 2010 by the Daily Prophet, Lucius Malfoy gave a statement that only deepened the mystery. What is lost to one age is simply waiting to be rediscovered by another. And if certain things prefer my company, well, who am I to refuse them? The article was pulled before print. So long as the Malfoy vaults remain closed and the ancient wards of Malfoy Manor intact, the truth about the vanished artifacts of Hogwarts will remain just out of reach. But every time a rare, magical pulse is felt in Wiltshire, every time a new cursed object is traced to unknown origins, the old suspicions rise again. And somewhere, perhaps deep beneath the quiet marble floors of the manor, the relics wait, not lost, but hidden. Guarded not by locks or spells, but by silence, pride, and the promise of legacy. Number 29. Lucius Malfoy's ministry manipulation. Lucius Malfoy never needed a title to hold power. His influence spread through the dark, velvet-lined corridors of the Ministry of Magic, like perfume, intangible but unmistakably present. He didn't sit behind a minister's desk or command attention from a podium. Instead, he moved through the shadows of wizarding society, whispering into the right ears, exchanging favors, and ensuring that every decision, from the smallest regulation to the appointment of a Hogwarts official, echoed his will. Throughout the 1980s and into the turbulent 1990s, Lucius cultivated relationships not with the loudest voices, but with the most susceptible. Men like Cornelius Fudge, whose insecurities far outweighed his convictions, were ripe for manipulation. Fudge was a man who worried far too much about what influential people thought of him, as Arthur Weasley once remarked, and no one was more influential in his eyes than Lucius Malfoy. With his pure blood lineage, impeccable wardrobe, and the kind of wealth that could silence entire departments, Lucius was both a benefactor and a threat. It was an open secret among ministry employees that Lucius Malfoy could enter any office without a scheduled appointment. The Department of Magical Law Enforcement, the Department of Magical Education, even the Department of Magical Games and Sports, no door was truly closed to him. "He makes donations," whispered junior officials, "and in return he gets information." One witch, who once worked under Dolores Umbridge in the improper use of magic office, recounted how a file regarding Arthur Weasley's illegal raid of Malfoy Manor in 1992 mysteriously vanished overnight. No one was ever held responsible. The power Lucius wielded over Hogwarts was subtle at first. Through the Board of Governors, of which he was a prominent and feared member, he dictated policies under the guise of concern. In his letters, always written on thick, embossed parchment, he would express grave concern over the safety of students, or outrage over the school's supposed tolerance of Dumbledore's eccentric staff. The safety of the children must come first, he often wrote, though his words were less about safety and more about control. His attempt to have Albus Dumbledore removed as headmaster in 1992 was not born of genuine concern, but of strategy. The Chamber of Secrets had been opened, and Lucius saw an opportunity not to protect the students, but to discredit Dumbledore and elevate his own influence. By threatening the board with dark implications and potential legal consequences, he pushed through a vote of no confidence. "You'll find," he said silkily to the board members, "that things tend to go very wrong for those who oppose me." None dared to question him. It wasn't until later, when Harry Potter exposed the diary of Tom Riddle as the true cause behind the attacks, that Lucius's involvement became clear. That diary, a dark artifact containing a fragment of Voldemort's soul, had been slipped into the possessions of a young girl by none other than Lucius himself. He had hoped the diary would destabilize Hogwarts, remove Dumbledore, and perhaps even bring Voldemort back under Lucius's own terms. "I have a very influential father," Draco once boasted, and indeed he did. The incident with the diary was not an isolated case, but part of a pattern. Lucius's way of influencing the magical world without leaving fingerprints. He rarely cast the spell himself, he merely handed someone the wand. When Cornelius Fudge rose to the position of Minister for Magic, Lucius Malfoy found in him a puppet more willing than most. He provided generous campaign support, a term that masked large monetary contributions and selective favors. In return, Fudge began appointing Lucius's allies to key positions. Dolores Umbridge, who later became infamous at Hogwarts, was one such beneficiary of Malfoy's whispered recommendations. "She's a woman who knows how to enforce order," Lucius had once said, handing Fudge a list of proposed ministry inspectors. This was how the infamous Commission for the Registration of Muggleborns was born. The public reasoning was security and documentation, but behind the official wording lay darker intentions. Lucius was one of the quiet architects of the system. He feared the dilution of magical bloodlines and saw Muggleborns not as equals, but as intruders. "It is not about hatred," he once told a private gathering of pure-blood families. "It is about preserving the purity of magic." Under Umbridge's hand, and with Lucius's shadow looming behind her, the Commission began investigating the ancestry of Muggle-born witches and wizards. Many were forced to present evidence of magical heritage they did not possess, because by nature their bloodlines were non-magical. Those who could not comply were labelled as having stolen magic, a phrase that Lucius himself coined during a private ministry briefing. People disappeared, families fled. Hogwarts itself was invaded by a new wave of ministry inspectors, each more zealous than the last. Lucius Malfoy had finally found a way to run the school without being its headmaster. Severus Snape, then headmaster during the height of Voldemort's return, once confided in Narcissa that Lucius is too entangled to pull free now. It was true. By then, Lucius had become both a servant of the Dark Lord and a manipulator of the ministry. Yet his true allegiance was never to Voldemort. It was to legacy, to the Malfoy name, to control. His fall from grace began with the Battle of the Department of Mysteries. When his attempt to seize the prophecy failed and he was imprisoned in Azkaban, the ministry could no longer ignore the truth. But even then, Lucius was never fully removed from power. He used his connections to secure a comfortable stay in Azkaban and was quietly released when Voldemort returned to full strength. Fudge's government collapsed shortly after, and Rufus Scrimgeour, the new minister, promised to clean house. though the deepest rooms remained untouched. Kingsley Shacklebolt, who later rose to minister after the war, once described the Malfoys as symptoms of an old disease, the blending of wealth, fear, and silence. But by then, Lucius had retreated into his manor, his influence fading, like an old spell, losing strength. He stopped attending ministry functions, he stopped funding political campaigns, he became a ghost in his own halls. Yet his legacy lingered. Many of the laws passed under Fudge's rule, shaped by Lucius's whispered advice, remained on the books for years. Policies concerning Muggle-born registration, bloodline documentation, and magical ancestry were not immediately repealed. The fear he had sown remained rooted deep, like thorns in the foundation. Draco Malfoy, his only son, would later walk the halls of Hogwarts and hear the whispers. "That's Lucius Malfoy's boy." Some said it with fear, some with pity. Draco, once proud of his father's power, began to question what that power had cost. In the end, it was Draco who made the quiet decision to distance himself from his father's legacy. "I don't care what they think," he said once in the Great Hall. "Let them judge. At least I know who I am." Lucius never responded. He sat in his study, surrounded by relics of old glory, silver goblets, framed letters from ministers, books bound in dragon hide. He no longer spoke of politics, not because he had changed, but because the world had. And in that new world, Lucius Malfoy was a relic. In a rare public statement after the war, when questioned about his past actions, Lucius said only, "I did what I believed necessary to protect my family and our traditions. History will judge whether I was right." It was the closest he ever came to admitting guilt. His influence on the Ministry of Magic cannot be overstated. He shaped policy not through law, but through fear. He altered the course of education not by teaching, but by removing teachers. He never served as minister, yet entire departments paused when he walked by. "Power," Dumbledore once said, "is not measured by position, but by the number of people who choose to follow your will without ever questioning it." Lucius Malfoy knew this better than anyone, and for a time the ministry was his stage. Its actors performed to the music of his voice, its laws echoed the values of his name. But like all spells, his influence had a duration. And when it broke, the silence that followed was deafening. The ministry would recover, slowly, painfully. But the shadow of Lucius Malfoy remained, not as a ghost or a villain, but as a reminder that sometimes the greatest threat to justice is not the enemy who strikes from the front, but the friend who smiles and walks beside you in the halls of power.